Today on the Writing Biz, I have Gabrielle Harbowy as a guest. Gabrielle is an award nominated author and editor and current literary agent. Her 20 years of experience and the ability to look at the writing industry from different perspectives makes her the right person to help authors learn more about their writing business. Thank you so much for coming on today, Gabrielle. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me, Laura. I'm excited to be here.
What do agents look for when considering an author, especially first time authors?
So, the first thing that agents look for is completely impersonal. It's the manuscript. It's, is this a book I can sell? That's
Right.
that's what it all comes down to, because if we take on an author that has a book that we don't know how to sell, we're wasting everybody's time. So that's first. But also, I'm looking for someone who behaves professionally and treats this like a real job. I'm looking for a professional query letter that's not too personal, not too gimmicky, not too cutesy. I'm looking for knowledge of the industry in the query letter. Uh, I'm looking for some drive and aspiration to really make this work as a career. I'm looking for someone that I can mesh well with. And I'm looking for someone where it's clear that if I have a vision for the book, that we have the same vision for the book, because ultimately it's the author's work, it's not my work. So I don't want to be a person who transforms the work into something the author doesn't represent, something that isn't wholly theirs. So their vision comes first. Some of this I get through the query letter, some of it I get through reading the full manuscript, some of it I get through maybe a call with the author if I'm interested, but those are the things that I'm looking for along the way.
Do you find that's difficult, let's say with a first time author, for them to understand how the process works and what they need to do along the way?
I think that by the time I've gotten to the phone call stage with an author, I'm pretty sure that they understand the process, but I definitely see a lot of queries from people who don't understand the process and who may have like misconceptions about the process or are just going by what they've seen extremely inaccurately about agent author
Right.
relationships on TV. This isn't like Castle where your agent sends a limo to you to pick you up for your book signing to and fills you with champagne and I've seen queries that seem to think that's the way it works. At the same time, I'm not the maid who does the paperwork that you don't want to do. I'm not the servant. I'm not the person that you hire to get your book ready for you. I'm your collaborator in this process. I'm not taking your entire book on by myself. I'm just making sure that you don't have to take your whole career on by yourself either. So I
Right.
do look for a collaborative relationship. I really like being friends with my authors. It's not a requirement, but it definitely makes me feel better about the process and feel better about that partnership. So someone that I can relate with, that we have the same sense of humor, we have the same vision for the book, we have an understanding of each other, that definitely helps, but that's much later in the process. And I feel like for a book that I absolutely loved, as long as our vision was the same on the book, like that would
Mhm.
be enough. I don't know. My first clients were people that I had already worked with in publishing. I'd been an editor for many years and I've done anthologies and I've worked with a lot of authors. And I was flattered when people came out of the woodwork that I had worked with 10, 15 years ago and said, now that you're agenting, considering the great rapport we had on this project, I would love for you
That's
to represent.
terrific.
And it was just the most flattering thing. So I represent some old friends, and that's great. I also represent some new friends. I also represent some people who are a little less close, but have great books. And I know we see eye to eye, but we're not best friends
Right.
because ultimately this is a business relationship first, and we don't have to be. but that's always kind of my preference.
That's interesting because building that kind of relationship leads to being able to handle more honest discussions. I would think. I know that you can talk more personally, dig deeper with a friend than you could just somebody you hired.
You
You
really
know, I
can.
think that
And it's the more you edit someone or work with someone, the more you get used to the way they write and the quirks in their writing, and the more you know what to
right.
look for. So I feel like I enjoy that process too. I enjoy the starting point, sure, but I enjoy, okay, I know that you're going to do this a lot in this manuscript and I have to watch out for it. And that puts me ahead of the game as an
Good.
editor. And because my training is in editing, my experience is in editing, I do have a very editorial style as an agent because I feel like it's my job to make the book the best it can be before it goes out to editors. So I feel like I'm ahead of the game if I already know your style as a writer.
From a writer's perspective, that's a great benefit in an agent because they can look at the manuscript not just as a product, not just as a finished, complete project, but look for issues, even if they had other editing done that were not picked up. With all the
Right,
experience that you have, you would notice different things that are more of a timely concern. So if you know what sells right now compared to what sells 10 years ago. If
right,
somebody's been working on their book for 10 years, then maybe it's not quite as marketable as it was 10 years ago.
right.
But being able to have all that experience and all that knowledge to fall back on really is beneficial.
It is.
That's terrific. Yeah.
It puts me ahead of the game in terms of noticing things that I think other people would notice as well, but I'm just used to that author and how they work. I was at
Mhm.
one conference with an author whose work I had recently edited, and I teased her that she had a drinking game. It was just this phrase that she used a lot in her books. So it was like, "Oh, every time you see this phrase, drink." And I had phrased it that way in edits because I knew her and I'd worked with her a lot.
Right.
And it wasn't to say, "Don't ever use this phrase, just be mindful of how many times you're using it and really think about when you want it to stay and when you don't need it." But a couple of my other authors overheard me, and instead of being offended or embarrassed, all of them said, "What's mine? What's mine?" And it was just such a great
So cool.
moment in terms of friendship and rapport, but also in terms of making me realize I really do know these people's writing if I can pull this off the top of my head without even looking at their manuscript. You have people rounding on each other too much when they're fighting, and you have every random group of people that you have is half a dozen people, and little things like that.
Often those are things that an author just wouldn't even notice that they do.
Right,
That
and as an author, I have these things too that I don't realize that I do. So I have absolutely got empathy for it, and I like surrounding myself with people where I don't feel like the school teacher correcting their paper. I feel like their partner in polishing this thing that they wrote that I absolutely love.
I could see how building these relationships with your authors is so helpful to your process. Nobody likes to be told that they have to kill a darling.
No, and I don't think this is every agent's perspective. I think that I'm probably rare in this regard that I put so much emphasis on the rapport, but it's just because I was spoiled by being able to represent my friends. And I love it. And I love advocating for authors. Uh, and the more I like you as a person, of course, the harder I'm going to fight for you. So it just seems natural to me.
I get that completely. So you mentioned the query letter, and there's so much information about letters that it's hard to parse out what's needed.
There really is a lot of advice out there, and all of it contradicts. I'm sorry, writers. I know that's out there. I know it's confusing. I know that it's really hard to find your way with how to do a query letter when so many people are telling you so many different things. I like for a query letter to be really straightforward. I like for it to be like the cover letter for a job application, for a resume. Your sample pages are your resume, and your query letter is your cover letter.
Mhm.
Primarily, I want to know your name, obviously, the book's name, the genre, the market, that's the age range, adult, young adult, new adult, and the word count. And then I want to know what it's about. And what it's about is not a list of tropes and themes. It's literally, who is this book about? What do they do? What are the stakes if they fail? And then maybe a paragraph on your background, something to personalize the letter and make it stand out, like, oh, here's something we
Sure.
have in common, or here's something really interesting, or here's something that qualifies you to be the best person to have written this book. This is a pirate nautical fantasy, and I've lived on a boat for the last 20 years. It's the
Whatever started.
credibility factor. It's, okay, before I've even read anything here, I know that I'm not going to have to fact check this as vigorously because the author knows what they're talking about. And that doesn't mean that someone without that experience is going to be worse or have a worse chance or be less of a writer. It just means that this is the specific reason this person wrote this particular book. So that's always a thing that we like to see. If you have a big online platform, that's always a good thing to include. You don't have to, especially as a debut author, but we would love for you to at least have a social media presence to show that there's some place that we and eventually editors can go online to look at you and see that you're a real person. But again, all of these things pale compared to the pages themselves. It's just, this is your introduction to the pages. And this is another chance for you to show that you're taking this seriously as a career. And that's the important part. This is like the vibes test of, is this a person I could work with? Is this a person who's taking this seriously? And that is going to be my first impression before I get into the pages themselves.
When you ask for the pages, how do you want the pages?
I want the beginning of the book.
Mhm.
If there's a prologue, you can skip the prologue. You can tell me there is a prologue, but I'm starting these pages with chapter one. Or you
Uh-huh.
can include the prologue if it's small. My problem with prologues is that they don't usually include the main character that I've been made to be excited for in the query,
I
if it's a
understand.
good query. I've just learned about this character and their problem, and I'm intrigued, and I want to go right into seeing them do their thing. So if it
Right.
opens with something 300 years in the past, or the adult main character as a child, then that's disorienting to me, and it's not showing me what I've been promised. But again, not all prologues are bad. You will see online, prologues are evil. Not all prologues are evil. Some prologues work, some of them are great. But for my sample, I do want to see the opening of the book. And if you send me a prologue, then that's two openings of the book, really. So that's
Right.
just making things harder for you as a writer because you've got to nail
Right.
two openings.
I
But
can
I
see
do like
that.
to see the beginning. I don't want to see random chapter that you think is the best chapter in the book because
That's
I'm looking at this from the viewpoint of the editor who's going to be saying, well, if the first chapter isn't interesting, nobody's going to read this, so we're not going to buy
right.
it.
'Cause if you're standing in a bookstore and you picked up a book, that's what you read. It's the first chapter. So that
Right.
decides where if you're going to continue on with the book. That
Unless you're
would
one
have
of
to be
those
very important.
really strange people who opens to the back of the book first in a bookstore, but I don't get those
Okay.
people. I validate their right to do that, but I don't get it. More power to you, but I'd rather not know the ending in advance. But you read however you want to read. It's all good.
Right.
But most
So
readers and most publishers are not going to do that. They're going to say, does the opening grab me? So the opening has to be grabbing.
so how many pages do you ask for?
I ask for 10 pages. My boss asks for 5. I have a lot of
Mhm.
colleagues who ask for 5. I ask for 10 just because if there's a prologue, I want a little more than that. And because sometimes that takes me into the second chapter. So if there's another point of view, I get a little taste of that. But usually on the first couple pages, you've already made up your mind. I like
Right.
giving a little extra room.
See, one of the great things I think about looking for an agent is that it's, besides the fact they are incredibly helpful to your success, is that it's almost like a pregame for looking for a publisher. So you're going to get the same limited view of your work that decides whether your work has value as you would with the publisher. And I
That's
think
a
that's really helpful.
That's a really good point that I'm glad you brought up because when we turn around and send books on submission, what we're doing is exactly what you did when you queried us, except now you have someone else doing it for you. We're sending a pitch letter, we're sending the manuscript and the synopsis, we're talking you up a little bit, but basically it's exactly the same process. We're just doing it now. So if you can get an agent interested, chances are you can get a publisher to open the manuscript and start reading.
I don't even know if it needs to be said, but having a good agent is so important to that process because a publisher who knows that an agent sends him good works is going to be quicker to pick that up off the pile.
That's true
So I,
too. Yeah,
yeah, because I see a lot of that. You know how the writing business is, that a lot of people don't know how to handle these steps, or they try to take shortcuts. And that's one reason that we have this show, is to help them understand the process better and understand the value of going step by step through the process, especially if they have any intention of traditionally publishing, that there's a way to do things and a way not to, and that professionalism matters.
it
And
really does. Professionalism is everything. I've received all sorts of query letters and I've received really professional ones and really generic ones and really off the wall ones. And the ones that stand out to me are the ones that just give me the information I want. You'll see a lot of advice online that say query letters shouldn't be more than 400 words. I'm not that specific about it, but I also feel like if you can't say those brief things in under 400 words, you might need to look at your query again and figure out what is taking up all that real estate in the query. Is it the history of how and why you decided to become a writer? Because that's interesting, but this isn't where it belongs.
there's also the issue of not being able to describe your book.
Right.
That's something authors struggle with quite often, is being able to describe their book. It's, if you've gone through to the point where you've done beta readers, and that sometimes that's helpful to ask them how would they describe your book, so you can kind of see what it looks like outside of yourself.
Going back to the school analogy, this isn't like a test where you can't get help. You can absolutely get all the help you need. You can ask any of your friends, read the synopsis without having read the book and tell me if it makes sense. Read this
Like,
pitch with having read the book and tell me if I've left anything important out or if I'm focusing on the wrong things. And when you add different points of view, when you have multiple points of view in a book, it gets even harder to figure out what's the main story, what's the main conflict in this book, what should I be sharing? Because it's really tempting to need to explain everything when what I really want is who is the main character? How do they interact with their world? What's their main conflict? And
right.
what are the stakes if things aren't resolved? And by what are the stakes, I mean really specific stakes. I don't mean their world will end or everything changes or those are super generic and they don't tell me anything. Just like saying my book is a fantasy, urban fantasy that has kidnapping and car crashes and an armadillo. That doesn't tell me what it's about. And especially now, I think one of the trends in querying is to list tropes. And we all love tropes. Tropes are great. But tropes also don't tell me what it's about. Who are the characters and why do I care about them is what I need to know before I care about any of those other things. I need to care about that character and care about what happens to them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you because I love to read and I read fantasy fiction a lot, historical fiction, things like that. But I, when I'm choosing a book, I really pay attention to the description and see if I'm getting the information I need there to want to open the pages of the book. So I know many readers do that. And
Yes.
it's so important to get a handle on all that information so that when you're ready to market and to get your work out there, that you have the ability to put together your pitch. It's not as easy as it sounds either.
It's really not. I fully agree with all the people who say if I could have described this in 20 words, I wouldn't have had to write 10,000 words. But
Right.
it's also kind of your job to describe it in 20 words because that's going to carry your book all the way through and make people interested in putting that investment in buying and reading 100,000 words, especially if you're a debut author and there's nothing else from you that they can go on.
The writing business and the writing craft have to work hand in hand.
Which
And
is
a good example of why you have to be able to think as a business person and as the author of the book when you're putting together materials like that. It's not as subjective as it sounds. It's a formula.
it is. It's subjective in the sense of different people like different things, but there are also objective benchmarks that you have to
Mm.
meet in order to get through those doors and even let the subjective issues become a factor.
How many queries do you take in a year, ballpark?
1,500 or so.
Okay, that's a good amount.
It's a good amount. It's not a huge amount. My boss, Marissa Corvisiero, who owns the agency, gets
Oh,
about 900 a month. And
wow.
I think that's not a good amount. I think that's too many. She has a team of interns working with her in her box to be able to process all of them in a timely manner. And I'm happy with my little 150 or so a month where I can go through them on my own and I don't need to call in reinforcements. And I also have
Yeah, but
time to do other work.
that's intense.
That just showcases why it's so important for everything to be laid out in a clear, concise manner where the agent can go through it and objectively say, okay, I know this isn't going to be for me. I have to look all over the page to figure out what your genre is, and it's different up in the header than it is in the message of and your title is changed in the synopsis than it is in the query letter, and now I don't know what the book is called, and this happens, and people get nervous. I wanna make sure that I say, "We know that people get nervous, and we know that nervous errors are a thing, and we make them ourselves, and we have empathy for that. We are aware of that. We are aware that Query Manager screws up your formatting. We are aware that you may not have noticed that you still have the brackets from your template where it says, uh, I'm interested in querying you because bracket list reason here. We
Oh,
get
no.
that. We see a lot of that and we understand why it happens. And I have absolutely sent an email to an author saying that I love their book and gotten the book title wrong. Uh, it happens to us too. We're not holding things like that against you, but at the same time, the professionalism and the making it easy for us to find the information we need and not obscuring it in a whole bunch of stuff that if we have to scroll through 3 pages of query letter and we don't know what we're looking at, and after those 3 pages, we still don't know what your book is about, that's gonna set us off on the wrong foot to look at your pages. But the simple human errors, one typo is
We're
okay.
underpaid.
Systemic typos are not okay, but one typo, the more important a document is, the more likely the typo gnomes will slip one in. It's just how it happens, and we know.
I want to ask you another question before we talk about self editing. So you've accepted this person's book. What are your next steps?
My next steps are to do an editing pass on the book. On the phone call, I will have discussed our visions for the book and make sure they're aligned. And I'll also explain uh, in kind of vague detail uh, what what changes I would love to see that would make the book stronger to get a sense
Right.
of whether the author agrees with me or not. We tend to be a little bit vague because sometimes we've just done a lot of free work and given a lot of free advice, and sometimes an author will take that and go elsewhere with the book. So we don't want to give away all our secrets, but enough to help them understand our perspective. I love this, but I think this part could be more developed. Uh, I would love to see the villain have his own character arc, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
This title was already used by this book, and I know you can't copyright titles, but you might want something more distinguishing, things like that.
Right.
And so we'll have done that already. But my next steps are to go ahead and take those edits that I've made notes for myself about and put them into a format that the author can use. Get the author onboarded at the agency, make sure that the author has some kind of social media presence set up uh, so that that exists by the time the book goes on submission. And then when the author is doing their edits on the book, I will be researching editors. I'll usually have a couple in mind already, but I'll be researching more so that by the time we're ready to go out on submission, I'll have a list of 20 or so. And I will be crafting the query letter and uh, punching up the synopsis and doing those other behind the scenes things so that when the author is ready with their revisions, the book is ready. The other parts are ready to go out on submission to editors.
There's something that I want to understand just to make it clear. So when you accept a manuscript, you expect a fully edited, formed manuscript. And I get that. I know that during the process there will be changes and re-edits, etc.,
Mhm.
because
Yes.
that's just the nature of the work. Now, that's something that I think that sometimes there's some confusion among authors. They go out and spend a fortune to get a book edited, assuming that's the final edit, and then go to the agent and publisher and find out no, there's going to be more edit. I think that's important for authors to understand that it's not a finished product when it gets to your desk,
Oh no,
that
it
it's
is
a
not.
readable,
It is not a
you
finished
know,
product until it's on a shelf.
right. So it's developmentally sound
Yes,
and
it's as good as
it's
the
it's a
author can
readable
get it.
manuscript, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's as good
Okay.
as you can get it before you're sick to death of having read through it 15 times and you're not even seeing it anymore. And then a little more because you've gotten a couple other people to help you and make sure it's good.
I tell you, I suffered with that myself because I read too fast to read my own manuscript, and I do try to slow down and I try reading backwards, but no. So
Yeah.
my daughter is my first person that I go to, and I say, "Read this," and she catches a lot. She doesn't catch everything. She's not an editor,
Mhm.
but that helps me understand where the obvious problems are,
Yeah.
and then moving forward. But it's we'll go ahead and talk about self-editing because it's very hard to self-edit your own work. It takes a specific type of skill set that not all writers have. It's kind of like building your own website. You don't have that skill set, and it will take you forever to do it. And the finished product's not going to be near what it could have been if you had hired somebody with that skill set.
It the I think the biggest thing about self-editing for me uh, is that the brain sees what it expects to see.
Mhm.
So you wrote those words, you know how it goes in your head. That's what you see. So the first thing you have to do is put it aside long enough to forget what it says.
Right.
if you have the ability to do that. If you're writing for hire under a deadline, you don't have the leeway to put it away for 6 weeks or however long it might take. But
Right.
ideally, that's the first step. It's also really helpful to know yourself. And like you said, whether you have the capacity for self editing in the first place. If you are a person who knows you skip words, you can take a highlighter and put a dot under every word as you read it to make sure you don't skip words. You're still going to skip words. It's just how your brain works. Enlisting other people to read your book for you is terrific. I can also suggest having another person read your book out loud to you is great
Right.
because
But it's
that
also helpful for you to do it yourself too, because you want your book to sound a certain way. And when you read it out loud and you realize it doesn't, or that character voice is completely different on the page than what you see her say in your head,
right.
then
Or that
I
dialogue is actually pretty awkward but I will say that
right.
having someone else read it to you is even better because you know what you expect, and this other person, when they don't know how your sentence parses, when they
Right.
hesitate because they don't know where to put the emphasis in the sentence, that's a really good
Right.
clue to you that maybe you need to fix something and make it easier to read there.
Yeah, I would
Well,
agree with that. Going both ways, it's really helpful,
yeah,
particularly in the beginning stages to get ready for, because an editor doesn't want you to drop a bunch of pages of nonsense on their desk either.
no.
You
And
have
the
to be
other
responsible.
the
These are these people's professions,
right.
and they expect you to meet certain standards.
The other thing you can do, and this is absolutely priceless and invaluable, is pick up a copy of the Chicago Manual of Style, whatever the most recent edition is when you're writing, because this is the style guide that editors use to tell them where do punctuation marks go, when is a word hyphenated, when do you capitalize this, when do you put this in italics. So if you have that manual, then you will be able to copy edit yourself to a higher standard too and bring things up to where an editor would expect to see them.
I don't even want to get into a discussion about AI, but I do want to say that something I read the other day made a point about AI that I have a girlfriend of mine that she is a publisher in New England, and I said something about it on social media, and she's like, "No, you're right." So, it mentioned the Oxford comma, and that
Mhm.
one of the ways to identify AI produced work is because of Oxford commas. I'm like, what?
Well, keeping in mind that Oxford commas and M dashes and stuff are tools used by the writers that AI was trained on. So we had them
Right,
first. They're
right.
ours.
And if
AI does not own those things. I will pry them out of AI's cold dead hands because I'm not giving up my M dashes or my Oxford commas.
I totally agree with you. And it's just, to me, I'm just looking at this and thinking, what the heck? That cannot be how they're seriously judging this. And I mean, there's the whole discussion, like I said, we don't get into
Right.
about the programs that decide if something's AI or not and how they lean certain ways and whatever. But
Yeah. No,
oh, I was
go
so
with
upset
your
about
heart.
that.
Go with your heart. Go with the actual rules of grammar and don't worry about what anybody says about what punctuation you can and can't use or what
Thank you.
words you
Yeah,
can and can't use because of what they signal in terms of human made or not human made. If you're a human and you're making it, then it's human made. So,
I hope everyone listening heard that. It's so the grammar and punctuation is such an important part of the communication of the text.
it is.
That to say that you're limiting these 2 things that are completely helpful and necessary to get your point across, it's just rough.
Yeah.
It's definitely rough.
The other thing I'll put in here is that I edit with what I call empathy for fiction, which
Mhm.
is something being readable is more important than it being correct, and something expressing a thought, a mood, a sense, a feeling, evoking emotion is more important than being correct. So
Mhm.
in those places, I really advocate for the human touch and that human sense of maybe this isn't grammatically correct, but this is how this person would talk, and allowing yourself that freedom to be messy and human.
Right, and the story I'm working on now, there is a elderly, like in her 90s, Black woman in Louisiana, and spell check hates the way she talks.
Oh, I bet.
But that's the reality of how she talks. I'm from the South, and I know people that
Mhm.
talk like that. That's the reality of it. But not taking away from that to be grammatically correct is a horrible way to approach characters like that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And you should still put punctuation in the right place. The
oh,
period goes inside the quotation marks, not outside the quotation
yeah,
marks. That sort of thing is set. But with things like you could say, there's 3 of these instead of there are 3 of these. And if that's in dialogue, that's fine. If that's in first person narration and that's how that character thinks, that's
sure.
fine. You don't want to. I think a problem that you run into with new editors is that they're sticklers for what's correct and they tend to overcorrect without realizing that these messy human mistakes add soul and character and personality. And I think
Oh,
that's
yeah,
a
because
thing that AI will never understand either.
a group of 20-year-olds is going to talk much um, in a more relaxed nature than uh, a group of editors at a conference. It's
Well, you don't know how editors at a conference talk, but
like that probably was maybe
but
not that example, but you understand what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
In a professional environment,
yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, it's that's
Yeah,
one of my favorite things about reading is that character voice and seeing how authors handle dialect and how they use the written word and twist it to express more than
right.
you would think is capable in a sentence.
Yeah.
It's really a beautiful
And
thing.
readability and making sure that the meaning of those words comes through to the reader is absolutely first, but definitely don't shy away from breaking rules when it helps to make a character.
Right, right. I was telling you before we started about a book I was reading, The Empire of the Vampire. Empire of the Vampire. Yes.
Mhm.
And it's there's moments in that book where I just stop and I just wow because of the way that he can twist a sentence to express something unexpected. I just love it. I love that book. And that's one of the coolest things about being a writer and a reader is thinking in that kind of approach. How can I make this mine or more interesting, but still understandable and able to convey the emotions and the ideas
Mhm.
that I'm trying to get across
I'm a big
in a way
highlighter.
without
I
being cheesy.
Right. I highlight a lot when I read. I highlight in one color things
Okay.
that lines that really stand out to me as being beautiful, like you just said. And I highlight
Mhm.
in another color things that I think are going to become important to the plot, just because I want to see if I'm right. Uh, and then when I'm reading, even if it's a published book, I will catch typos and mistakes in a third color because I just can't not. I have to.
Right.
Otherwise, it'll bother me. But I
So
do
when you
that.
do you keep that to yourself?
Yes, I
You don't
keep
have
that
to
to
tell
myself.
me.
I don't
You don't
I
have to
mean if I'm being hired to tell you, then I will tell you. Otherwise, I'm not
right.
gonna tell you because why should I rain on your already published book and tell you how it's not
Yes.
good? What there's no benefit to that for anybody.
I agree with that because, but like I said, I read a lot and I do reviews, but on most of the reviews, almost exclusively positive because just because I don't like a book doesn't mean that someone else isn't going to like it.
Right.
And if it's a really terribly put together book, I'm sure
Mm,
the author is well aware by the time I've read it.
yeah,
You'll
and
need to hear from me.
I'm sure they were doing their best. I'm sure that if it's a self-published book, they just wanted to get
Right.
it out in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that. They don't need me raining on their parade. I would rather look for the good in it. And that actually
Like,
brings me back to agenting because there is such a subjective part of choosing manuscripts. And there are things that I just don't like, or there are things that I like as a reader, but I don't want to represent. And it does not mean a book is bad. It just means that a book is not a fit for my list. Like when we say that, that's not just a euphemism. That's not just being polite. It's sometimes true. To give you a gentle, mundane example, when I read a frame story where it's the older character talking about telling someone a story about their younger days or something like that, I invariably fall in love with the wrong frame.
oh,
So, like Pat Rothfuss's The Name of the Wind. I loved the grizzled old barkeeper, and I did not care what he was like as a student in school. And that's just me. That's just a thing that I know about myself and how I like to read.
that's interesting.
So if you send me a frame story, I'm going to love the wrong frame. I'm not going to be the best fit for it.
Right.
And the
That
same
makes
with
sense.
portal stories. The same with time travel stories. I love reading a good time travel story or a time loop. I do not want to be the last bastion of fact checking before a time loop story goes out into the world. That's
Yeah.
way too much pressure on me. Someone else can do that. I would like to read them. I enjoy them. I'm not going to represent one.
I've I've always wondered, so maybe this is a question that I could ask, but one of my favorite kind of books to read is the one that goes between the past and the present, back and forth.
Mhm.
Um, like, oh, I can't think of the word up, but it doesn't matter. You know what I'm
The
talking about.
dual timeline.
That has
Yeah.
right, thank you. That has to
Mhm.
be so difficult to edit.
It's not that hard. It's much easier than
Really?
time travel
Yeah, I
because
guess it's
you can also it's easy enough to write a story bible for that kind of book
mhm,
because it's all consistent with itself. And also, you can kind of self edit those things by taking all the past scenes in a row and then taking all the present
right,
scenes in a row and making sure that there's nothing conflicting.
right,
That's
right.
not too bad.
Woman of
I am writing one of those right now, and it is hard. I
Truth,
am not enjoying that process.
really.
Yeah.
That's I would think it would have to be hard. I know that a lot of times when another kind of book I like is the when you have multiple viewpoints.
Mhm.
But I've noticed that often when a book has multiple viewpoints, there's more than one author. So
Sometimes. Sometimes.
yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's interesting when each author kind of has their pet character and they mesh those 2. But it's also interesting when one author does multiple points of view, and the key to doing that, and getting an agent on a book with a multiple point of view is that the points of view have to sound different. They can't just sound like the same character.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
You have to be
Um,
able to, without knowing whose chapter you're in, go to a random page and then be able to figure it out. They have to be different enough.
right,
Especially if the 2 characters are interacting with each other, like if it's a romance and it's each character looking at the other through their eyes, you will get absolutely lost on whose point of view you're in and who is the I and who is the they if they're not really distinct. But that's
right,
also an opportunity. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That lets you get more in depth into the character and really use their lens to show us more about them.
it's uh, as a reader and author, it's a lot of fun to try to pick that apart. And I would think having that extra oomph to where you had the editor and agent experience would make it even more enjoyable to read. Yeah, a good piece of writing
Yeah.
and look at it that way. That's pretty interesting. We've covered a lot, Gabrielle.
We have.
Really have.
I feel like we
I'm
could go on for a couple more hours though, because there's
I know.
just so
I
much.
know. I know I could because I just have so many questions and I'm so curious about the process. And I have been for years to from the moment that you have the idea for the book all the way through that there's just so much to learn about it. And I love to hear people's different viewpoints and how what readers are looking for and what the different professionals are working for. It's just fascinating to me. It truly is.
Yeah.
Um, well, before we end, you mentioned to me that you would be interested in if anyone in the audience, Gabrielle right now is as a whole closed for queries. But if anyone in the audience would like to query her, they send me an email to the Writing Biz Show at gmail.com. I'll put it in the notes and I will send you a link to her query box. So just put in the subject line, query for the show, and, or actually just put query link. You could put that and I will forward all that and see what if we can make any magic happen.
Yeah. I do
Do you have
have
anything to
my
add to that?
I have my manuscript wish list up. It's under
Yeah,
my name at manuscriptwishlist.com, and it's also at the Corvisiero website. So you can see what I'm looking for. Generally fantasy, science fiction, LGBTQ representation, disability representation, adult and young adult mostly. There are some very specific things that I'm not looking for, so make sure you don't send me anything that I specifically say I don't want. But yes, I would love to make my query box available to your listeners, and whether I'm open or not. So I will have a special link that you can go to and send a query letter in 10 pages. And I look forward to seeing what comes in.
I'm interested to find out myself. Um, so I will make all that information available in the show notes. My email and the link to what Gabrielle is looking for, and hopefully we can help in some way through this process.
Yeah, I would love to have a success story happen. I also have a
Yeah,
Patreon where I'm happy to answer writing, agenting, querying related questions. We'll put the link to that in the show notes as well.
sure,
Feel free
absolutely.
to come over and uh, follow for free and get access to lots of content. And my tiers go up to $25. And at the $25 tier, you get a free, well, not free, obviously, included one-on-one 30-minute session once a month where you can ask me questions, or we can talk about your projects, or I can
Great.
just cheer you on.
That's terrific because every little bit helps and
Yep.
get different viewpoints on your work is something that can really drive you forward.
Yeah.
Also, it helps you people stay motivated if
Mhm.
you have somebody, in your pocket, so to speak. So
And
that's
I really love elevating writers. That's why I do what I do. So I'm always happy to answer questions and help people, whether they're a fit for my wish list or not.
that's a terrific amount of openness that you have. That's I appreciate.
Thank
No,
you.
run into that all the time.
I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen a lot of things, and I have a lot of perspective, and I enjoy sharing it.
So tell me
Because
how.
I think,
So
go ahead.
mhm, go ahead. Nope. Go ahead. Finish your
Oh,
thought.
because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of myth out there, and a lot of urban legend about how publishing works. And I'm happy to demystify what I can, because it is confusing and there's a lot and it conflicts. And sometimes it conflicts because different people want different things. And sometimes it's just someone said a thing, or was afraid of a thing and said, I hope the industry isn't like that. And the industry is like that, is the part that catches on.
Right. I've seen that often where, not even just in reading, I'm sorry, writing,
Mhm.
but if somebody has a bad experience, and maybe due to some force that wasn't anybody's fault, that they take it out on the business they're working with, and that's not a that doesn't help this situation at all.
Right. It's like if you go on Amazon and you give a book 1 star because it was delivered with a bent corner. That's not the author's fault, and that 1 star is gonna live with them forever.
It is, and it's just like the one stars are so much more powerful in the end than the fours and fives sometimes.
They really are.
It's
There's
just
some
yeah,
guy on Goodreads who goes around giving a book a 1 star review with no text, and then he has a different account where he'll give the same book a 5 star review, and it's clearly him. It's like Chuck and Anti-Chuck or something like that, where it's clear that it's the same guy doing this twice, and he thinks that they cancel out, and he thinks it's funny, and what that means is that a lot of authors have a 1 star review for no reason that drags down their entire average.
right, right. Well, karma.
Well,
Later in karma.
yeah,
I
but
mean, there's just no reason to mess with somebody for on any level in any part of life that you have your
yeah,
own life with that.
yeah, but I mean that's how these things that's how misinformation gets started. Oh, I saw that this book had 1 star, so it must not have been good. And then your friend says, "Oh, so and so said this book wasn't good." And then it carries on. So the same things kind of happen with publishing advice where, "Oh, you can't have a query letter over 400 words," or "You can't say this," or "You can't do this," or "You have to do this." And most of that is
You see
most of
that a
that
lot
is full of exceptions.
when people jump into a genre that they are not interested in or don't understand
Mhm.
and try to compare it to like high level literary fiction to a enemies versus lovers fantasy book
Yeah,
with dragons and elves is I don't we could go on all day about that.
we could. Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
tell everyone how to get a hold of you,
Okay.
where to look for you, and then, like I said, the other information will be in the show notes.
Terrific. So I'm at gabrielleharbowy.com, and I'm also at patreon.com/Gabrielle_H, and on Blue Sky, I'm Gabrielle-H.
Okay, I love blue sky.
And on uh from my website, you can find my agency profile and my page there and anything else you need to get in touch with me. I'm also going to be doing a class uh, associated with Clarion West in May, uh, and that'll be on finding comparison titles. So
Oh,
that'll be
cool.
advertised soon as well.
And that's online.
Yes, that'll be a virtual class, and I can give you information on that for the show notes.
Oh, that would be terrific. Yeah, I would love to put that in there because that would be a
Great.
very interesting class to take because so I know I struggle myself with that because you just it's hard to pick and choose. That's all I have
It
to say.
is, and you can really work yourself into a panic over it because it's just like query letters where everybody's got different advice and you don't know what to follow.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, come with me while we demystify more topics in publishing.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Thank you so very much for coming on. You gave us such a tremendous amount of things to think about and good advice that I think will really help the audience understand more about the agenting process
Mhm.
and uh, how to go through it successfully to find a good agent.
Thank you so
So
much
thank you
for
for that.
having me and for having this podcast as a resource for writers who definitely find it really helpful and need the support. because it's tough out
Now,
there.
before we go, I want to share that Gabrielle will be teaching an online workshop on comparison titles for Clarion West. This is on May 19th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time. The sign-up link is in the show notes. To learn more about the podcast, visit thewritingbiz.com. Sign up on the website to be the first to learn when new episodes are out. And don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take what you've learned and put it to work in your own writing biz.